My name is Nora Whitfield, and I'm 66 years old. I thought the quietest day of my life would be the day I buried my mother. I was wrong. The quietest day came at my husband Gregory's funeral, where even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The service was small, too small for a man who'd fixed every child's bike in Spring Creek and never once charged a widow for a repair. No co-workers, no old fishing buddies, not even the mailman who used to stop for coffee. Just my two sons, Daniel and Ethan, Daniel's wife Lydia in a black dress that looked like a magazine ad, my neighbor Doris Keene, the pastor, and me. The casket looked expensive and false, the kind of wood that tries too hard to be respectable. I remember thinking it didn't belong to Gregory. Nothing about that box felt like him. When the pastor spoke of rest and reward, Daniel kept checking his watch, and Ethan stared at a point somewhere over the pastor's shoulder, jaw set like he was in a meeting he couldn't escape. Lydia dabbed her eyes with a tissue without wetting it. I told myself grief looks strange on everyone. I told myself that when men are boys again, they hide their tears. I told myself too many things until my phone buzzed in my purse with a sound that cut through the eulogy like a snapped string. A message from an unknown number. I'm alive. That's not me in the casket. My fingers went cold. The words blurred, then sharpened, as if they were being typed directly onto my heart. I typed back, hands trembling. Who are you? The reply came before my breath returned. I can't say. They're watching. Don't trust our sons. For a moment, the cemetery tilted. Lydia glanced over, all concern and perfume. Are you all right, Nora? She whispered. I closed my purse. Fine, I said, too quickly. She smiled with her mouth but not her eyes and turned back to the pastor. I stared at the name carved into the stone marker, Gregory Whitfield, and tried to make the letters fit the man I'd loved for 42 years. We met when I was 24. I used to pass his father's bicycle shop on my way to the market, wearing the same faded dress more days than not, balancing other people's laundry on my hip. Gregory would step out with grease on his hands and a shy smile that always started in his eyes. Morning, Miss Nora, he'd say. Want me to tune up that bike of yours? I didn't own a bike. I said yes anyway, then stood there talking while he adjusted imaginary brakes and told me stories about fixing pedals with nickels when people couldn't afford parts. We courted under the old oak in Town Square Park, with a thermos between us and promises we were too poor to dress in rings. When it rained, our tin roof turned into a drumline, and we set out pots like an orchestra. Soprano pot by the stove, tenor pail near the door, bass pan in the hall. He fixed what he could and laughed about the rest. Then came Daniel, with Gregory's wide eyes and my stubborn mouth, and 2 years later, Ethan, content to follow his brother into every kind of trouble a decent boy can find. Sundays were river days, Gregory teaching them to keep their hands steady, to listen for the click of a gear, to mend before replacing. We were not rich in anything banks count. We were full of meatloaf on Tuesdays and stories at bedtime, and I thought that was enough to anchor any life. But boys outgrow anchor lines. Daniel started asking why our house leaned when others stood straight. Ethan learned to echo him. When Gregory offered Daniel a place in the shop at 18, he said, I don't want to get my hands dirty, Dad. I'm going to be important. The sentence sat on our porch like a stray dog that wouldn't leave. Years later, Daniel had a real estate job in the city. Ethan followed into the same world, and the visits shrank to brief appearances in shiny cars, expensive watches ticking louder than our clock. You and Dad should move somewhere better, Daniel told me once, glancing at the peeling paint. He said better like a verdict. When Daniel married Lydia, she stepped onto our porch in stilettos that sank into the dirt and recoiled at my meatloaf as if it might stain her tongue. She shook my hand with her fingertips. So quaint here, she murmured, scanning our walls. Later, I heard her whisper to Daniel, next time we take them out, this isn't us. I learned to stack my pride in the pantry and close the door. Now, at Gregory's grave, Daniel's hand was heavy on my shoulder, a gesture that should have warmed me. We'll handle everything, Mom, he murmured. Ethan nodded too quickly. It's what Dad would have wanted. Simple. No fuss. But Gregory loved fuss when it was made for people. He loved full rooms and bad coffee and neighbors leaning in the doorway. The emptiness of the day, how neatly it had been arranged, made my skin prickle. My phone buzzed again. Stay quiet. Act normal. Check the bank. I slid the phone back into my purse, felt Lydia's eyes graze my face, and lowered my gaze to the dirt tossed onto the casket. It made a sound like a lid closing. I told myself grief makes ghosts out of notifications. I told myself nothing at all. I just knew this. Something about my husband's death and this funeral was wrong. I kept my face schooled, folded my grief into the neatness everyone seemed to demand, and decided I would start with the thing the message demanded of me: silence. Then I would start looking. Hard. That night, after the funeral, the house was too loud with silence. Gregory's coffee mug still sat on the table, faint ring of yesterday's grounds at the bottom. His flannel jacket hung over the chair as though he'd only stepped out to fetch a wrench. I didn't touch a thing. I walked from room to room, pressing my fingers against the walls we had painted together, as though they could tell me if I was losing my mind. But every step echoed with the memory of the text: "Don't trust our sons." I thought of Gregory's warnings in the months before his death. He had sat on our porch with his pipe, staring at the horizon, eyes darker than usual. "Money's changed them, Nora," he told me. "Daniel talks numbers like a banker counting someone else's gold, and Ethan can't stop looking for shortcuts. Don't let them push you around." I'd scold him then, tell him he was being dramatic. "They're just busy," I'd said. But I see now, he hadn't been dramatic. He'd been afraid. The weeks leading up to the accident came back to me in painful fragments. Daniel had shown up one afternoon with papers in a leather folder. "Dad," he said smoothly, "you're 70. You should retire. We'll sell the house, cash out the shop, and set you and Mom up in a proper community. You deserve comfort." Gregory's jaw had tightened. "Work keeps me alive, son. You think I'll sit around waiting for death? No." Ethan backed Daniel up, eyes darting as though reading lines. "It's dangerous at your age. An accident could ruin everything." He'd said ruin everything, not hurt you. I remembered that now. The words had been wrong even then, though I hadn't wanted to hear them. The accident itself, it hadn't been right either. That Tuesday morning, I was preparing lunch when the phone rang. "Mrs. Whitfield?" a man's voice said. "Your husband has been in a serious accident. You need to come to Memorial Hospital immediately." My legs turned weak. Doris had to drive me, and I clutched her arm the whole way. The smell of antiseptic hit me before I reached the ICU. Machines beeped in cruel rhythm. Gregory lay there, swathed in bandages, tubes crowding his body. My strong, meticulous husband reduced to a fragile shadow. Daniel was already there, pacing the hallway. Ethan leaned against the wall, eyes red but oddly restless. No one had called them, at least not me. How had they arrived so quickly? I told myself not to ask, not while Gregory fought for every breath. "Mom," Daniel said, embracing me with force that felt rehearsed. "Dad's in bad shape. The doctors say one of the machines exploded in the shop." His voice lowered. "He may not make it." Ethan nodded, staring at the floor, jaw clenching as though he were waiting for a verdict. I walked into Gregory's room, touched his hand, miraculously free of burns, and whispered, "I'm here, love. You're strong. You'll beat this." For a second, I felt the faintest squeeze. His lips moved like he was trying to form words. Then the machines beeped louder and a nurse ushered me back. Outside, I overheard Daniel and Ethan speaking in hushed tones. "The insurance policy is $50,000, plus 75 workers' comp," Daniel muttered. Ethan asked, "Do we need to split with Lydia's side, or is it all ours?" I froze. My husband was fighting for his life, and my sons were tallying money like accountants balancing a ledger. 3 days of sleepless waiting blurred together. I lived in those hospital chairs, watching Gregory's chest rise and fall by machine. I begged the doctors to try everything, but Daniel kept repeating, "Dad wouldn't want to be a burden." And Ethan whispered, "The bills will destroy you, Mom." Their voices didn't sound like compassion. They sounded like negotiation. One night, I held Gregory's hand, whispering about our garden, about the tin roof music of our early years. His fingers moved again. His lips formed something, 2 syllables, I think. Don't. The monitor beeped. Nurses rushed in. They told me it was involuntary, a spasm. But I knew. My husband had tried to warn me. The next morning at 4:37 a.m., he was declared dead. I collapsed against his chest, begging for one more squeeze of his hand, one more word. Instead, Daniel appeared with a folder of funeral arrangements already prepared. Ethan stood beside him with papers for insurance claims. It was as if they'd rehearsed it all. At the funeral, their calmness was unbearable. Daniel spoke of efficiency, Ethan of closure. Lydia checked her phone during the sermon, but my mind was stuck on Gregory's unfinished whisper and that impossible text. I'm alive. Don't trust our sons. When the pastor's words ended, dirt hitting the casket like nails, my phone buzzed again. Check the bank. Look at the withdrawals. I pressed the purse shut before Daniel could glance my way. Something inside me shifted then. Grief twisted into suspicion. Fear hardened into resolve. That night, I sat alone at our kitchen table, Gregory's jacket across from me, and whispered aloud, "If you're trying to tell me something, I'll listen now. I promise." The next morning, I walked to Gregory's workshop. The sign still read Whitfield's Bicycle Repair since 1952, paint chipped but proud. My steps faltered as I turned the key. According to my sons, an explosion had torn through this place, enough to send Gregory to the ICU. Yet when I opened the door, the air smelled only faintly of oil and old wood. The machines stood where they always had, welder, compressor, saw. None bore scorch marks, none showed damage. The floor was swept clean, suspiciously clean, as though someone had scrubbed away not debris, but evidence. I searched Gregory's desk, drawers filled with old receipts, rubber bands, and sharpened pencils he never wasted. Beneath the false bottom of a drawer, I found a folded note in his unmistakable hand. The words made my chest constrict. Daniel insists I need more insurance, says it's for Nora, but his eyes, they're not right. I don't trust his intentions. Another note beneath it. Ethan brought papers to sign, claims they're for shop modernization. I don't understand the hurry. Something feels wrong. I sat at that desk, note trembling in my hands. Gregory had doubted them too. He had sensed the shadows creeping into our family. I thought of the faint squeeze of his hand in the hospital, the half-word he had tried to form. He'd been warning me. My phone buzzed. Another message. Check the bank account. See who moved money. I didn't hesitate. That afternoon, I walked into Spring Creek Savings, where Mrs. Thompson, the manager, had known us since we opened our first account. "Nora," she said gently, clasping my hands, "I'm so sorry about Gregory." I nodded, forcing my voice steady. "I need to review our accounts." She led me to her office, spreading out recent statements. My stomach dropped. Thousands of dollars had been withdrawn in the months before Gregory's death. $1,000 in January, $3,000 in February, $4,000 in March. "These withdrawals, Gregory made them?" I asked. Mrs. Thompson nodded. "He came in person, said it was for repairs at the shop." "Repairs? Gregory never spent without telling me, and certainly not thousands." "Do you have the signatures?" I pressed. She showed me the slips. At first glance, they looked like Gregory's, but shakier, hesitant. My husband's hand was always steady. Something about these signatures looked forced. I asked, "Was he alone when he made these withdrawals?" Mrs. Thompson frowned, thinking. "Not always. Once or twice he came in with Daniel, said he was helping with paperwork because Gregory had trouble with his glasses." My blood ran cold. Gregory's eyes had been sharp with his glasses. He'd never needed help reading contracts. That evening, I spread the notes, the bank slips, and the funeral papers across our kitchen table like puzzle pieces. The picture they formed was unbearable. Insurance increases, strange withdrawals, my sons hovering around Gregory's finances like vultures. The phone buzzed again. The insurance was their idea. They convinced Gregory it was to protect you. It was a trap. I whispered into the stillness. "Who are you? How do you know this?" The reply came fast. "He hired me, 3 weeks before he died. Meet me tomorrow, 3 p.m., Corner Cafe, back table. Ask no one else. SC." I stared at those initials. SC. Who? My heart pounded as though Gregory himself had spoken through the screen. Could it be true? Had he known enough to seek help? That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the house sounded like betrayal. I replayed Ethan's words at the hospital. An accident could ruin everything. Daniel's quick efficiency with funeral documents. Lydia's disdain, her talk of retirement communities. Their calm faces at the graveside. And that whisper in the ICU, Gregory struggling to warn me, to pass me a secret I hadn't been ready to hear. I clutched his jacket and whispered, "I'll go tomorrow. I'll find out what you wanted me to know. If you hired someone, I'll hear the truth. I swear I won't let them bury more than your body." At exactly 3 p.m. the next day, I walked into the corner cafe. The bell above the door jingled, cheerful in a way that mocked my nerves. My hands trembled around my purse, but I forced myself to the back, to a table shadowed by a potted fern. The place was half full. Students with laptops, a couple whispering over pie, an older man reading the paper. I ordered chamomile tea to steady my shaking and waited. Right on time, a tall man in his 50s approached, gray at the temples, clean-shaven, eyes sharp yet kind. He carried a battered folder tucked under his arm. "Mrs. Whitfield?" he asked softly. His voice was low, professional, but touched with sympathy. I nodded, unable to speak. He slid into the seat opposite me. "My name is Samuel Callahan. Gregory hired me 3 weeks before his death." The folder landed between us with a heavy sound. "Before I show you," he said, "I need you to prepare yourself. It will hurt." I braced myself. "I've been hurting since the day he died. Show me." He opened the folder and set down a small recorder. He pressed play. Gregory's voice, my Gregory, filled the air. "If something happens to me, it won't be an accident. Daniel keeps pushing insurance. Ethan asks about my routine, what I eat, when I leave, if Nora's with me. They act like vultures circling. Please, if I don't make it, protect her." My throat closed. Seeing his voice was like having him back, yet every word dug deeper into my grief. Callahan switched to another file, this time Daniel's voice. "We can't wait any longer. Dad's starting to ask questions. I already have the methanol. It looks like a stroke if we do it right." I gasped. The cafe blurred. "Methanol?" Callahan nodded grimly. "A toxic alcohol. Cheap, easy to get at hardware stores. Ingested, it causes blindness, brain damage, coma. Exactly what your husband suffered. Your son slipped it into his morning coffee." Before I could process, another recording played. Ethan's voice, thinner, anxious. "Everything's ready. Daniel told Dad it's a vitamin supplement. He'll drink it. By the time the doctors realize, it'll be too late." Then a third voice, Lydia's, cold and precise. "Do it quickly, before he changes his mind about the insurance. Once he's gone, we'll manage Nora. She's fragile, easier than him." I clutched the edge of the table so hard my knuckles ached. My children, my sons, and Lydia guiding them. The babies I had fed with spoons, the boys I had prayed over at night. They had become my husband's murderers. Callahan slid photographs across the table. Daniel leaving a hardware store with a small brown bottle, paying cash. Ethan's credit card records, thousands in gambling debts. Lydia's purchases of jewelry, trips, handbags. They weren't just greedy, Callahan said. They were desperate. Daniel owed $70,000 to a city lender. Ethan lost nearly $50,000 betting on sports. Lydia's taste only worsened it. I pressed a hand to my chest. And me? Why those messages about not trusting them? Callahan met my eyes. Because you were next. Listen. The final recording clicked. Daniel's voice again. Once Mom's alone, she won't last. We'll get her declared incompetent, or, better, a suicide. Widow can't cope without her husband. No one will question it. Ethan chuckled nervously. Her money, the house, the insurance, all ours. Lydia added, "We'll tell people it's depression." Tragic, but believable. The room spun. A waiter passed, oblivious, pouring coffee for another table. I sat frozen, the recorder's words searing my soul. My sons weren't planning only Gregory's death. They wanted mine, too. Callahan lowered his voice. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Daniel and Ethan meet Judge Miller to file for your guardianship. They'll argue grief has made you paranoid. They'll take your house, your savings, your freedom. If we don't act tonight, it may be too late. I clenched my fists until my nails dug crescents into my palms. For days I had wondered if grief was twisting my mind. Now I knew. It wasn't madness. It was murder. Gregory hadn't died in vain. He had fought to leave me the trail, and Samuel Callahan had carried it. Then we act tonight, I said, voice low but steady. I'll see them punished for what they've done. That evening, I sat in my kitchen with Callahan's folder spread before me. Photographs, receipts, recordings, my husband's notes. The evidence looked like shards of glass, each one cutting deeper. Doris came by with a casserole, but I told her I wasn't hungry. I couldn't risk telling her anything, not yet. If Daniel and Ethan discovered I knew the truth before the police moved, I would end up in a grave beside Gregory. At 8 o'clock sharp, the knock came. Not Callahan, not the police. My sons. "Mom?" Daniel's voice floated through the door, smoother than ever. "It's us. We brought dinner." I froze. My phone buzzed. A text from Callahan. "Stay calm. Don't eat or drink anything. Stall them. Police are on the way." I opened the door. Daniel stood with a bag of pastries from the bakery, Ethan with a thermos of coffee, Lydia gliding in behind them with her too-perfect smile. "You shouldn't be alone so soon after the funeral," Lydia said, kissing the air near my cheek. She set the pastries down on the table. "We thought we'd keep you company." "Special roast, Mom," Ethan added, pouring coffee into a mug before I could protest. "Your favorite brand." The smell wafted toward me, bitter, rich, and suddenly poisonous in my imagination. I pushed the mug away. "I've already had some." Daniel sat across from me, hands folded. His tone was syrupy, rehearsed. "We've been worried. Doris says you've been asking odd questions, visiting places, stirring things up." "I asked about your father's accident," I replied carefully. "Yes," Daniel said slowly, as if explaining to a child, "and grief makes people confused. We talked to a doctor, Dr. Albright. He agrees you're showing signs of paranoia. It happens with widows your age." Lydia reached across the table, patting my hand as though soothing a toddler. "We just want what's best for you. There are wonderful care facilities, safe, supportive. While you recover, Daniel and Ethan can manage your finances." I studied them in silence, my sons, my flesh and blood, planning to bury me in paperwork before burying me in dirt. "What if I don't agree?" I asked. Ethan shifted, eyes hardening. "Then we'll do it legally. Judge Miller already has Dr. Albright's report. Tomorrow at 10, he'll rule. You'll be declared incompetent." The walls seemed to close in. They were so sure of their plan, so certain I was powerless. Daniel leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Mom, we love you, but you can't live in the past. Dad's gone. This is the only way forward." I wanted to scream, to slap the smugness from his face. Instead, I forced a trembling smile. "Let me think about it," "Of course," Lydia purred, "but not too long, for your own good." When they finally left, leaving their untouched pastries behind, I collapsed into a chair, shaking. The front door had barely clicked shut before Callahan slipped in through the back. "You did well," he said. "You bought us time." I showed him the pastries, the coffee, untouched. His jaw tightened. Poison is the simplest way. Easy to hide, easy to blame on stress.
You were right not to touch it.
Minutes later, red and blue lights flickered through the window. Sergeant O'Connell entered, grim-faced. Callahan laid out the evidence on the kitchen table, the recordings, the bank slips, the photographs. The sergeant's expression hardened with each piece. "This is enough," he said at last. "We'll move before dawn. If they meet the judge tomorrow, you could lose everything." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by Gregory's photograph, whispering, "Tomorrow, love. Tomorrow I'll see them pay." At sunrise, police cars swarmed Daniel's gated house and Ethan's condo. My phone buzzed with unanswered calls as they tried to reach me. By 9 o'clock, Sergeant O'Connell knocked on my door again. "They're in custody, charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy. Lydia, too." I closed my eyes. Relief and grief tangled in my chest. Justice had come, but at a price no mother should ever pay. The trial began 2 months later in the county courthouse, and it seemed like all of Spring Creek had crammed inside to witness the spectacle. Reporters filled the benches, their pens scratching like insects. Neighbors leaned forward, whispering as if the verdict would rewrite the town's history. For weeks I had been the widow in black. Now I was the star witness in a story no one could believe. 2 sons accused of murdering their father for money. Daniel and Ethan entered in orange jumpsuits, shackled at the wrists, faces pale. Daniel tried to hold his chin high, but his eyes darted to me, pleading in silence. Ethan looked hollow, his hair unkempt, lips pressed in a thin line. Lydia followed, escorted by deputies, her expensive jewelry gone, her hair pulled into a bun that couldn't disguise her disdain. The prosecutor opened with precision. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is not a story of grief or misunderstanding. This is a story of greed, conspiracy, and betrayal." He played the first recording. Gregory's voice filled the room. "If something happens to me, it won't be an accident. Protect Nora." Gasps rippled across the gallery. Then came Daniel's cold voice. "I already have the methanol." The courtroom froze. You could feel the betrayal in the air, as if everyone present had lost something precious. When Lydia's voice followed, "Do it quickly, before he changes his mind," a woman in the back row covered her mouth and sobbed. I was called to the stand. My legs trembled, but my voice was clear. "I raised them with love," I told the jury, staring at Daniel and Ethan. "We were poor, but we had enough. Their father worked until his hands shook. I sewed until my eyes blurred. We gave them everything we had and more. But when they looked at us, all they saw was what we didn't have. They saw money we weren't spending." The defense tried to paint me as fragile, suggestible. "Mrs. Whitfield, isn't it possible that grief made you misinterpret events? That the withdrawals, the policies, the recordings, you viewed them through a lens of paranoia?" I leaned forward, meeting the juror's eyes. "Paranoia doesn't forge signatures. Paranoia doesn't buy methanol. Paranoia doesn't whisper about early inheritance while a father lies in a coma. I am not paranoid. I am a wife who buried her husband because her sons poisoned him." The most devastating evidence came from the medical examiner. "Exhumation revealed lethal levels of methanol in Mr. Whitfield's tissues," he testified. "Symptoms included blindness, confusion, coma, consistent with poisoning, not an explosion." The jury scribbled furiously. Daniel buried his face in his hands. Ethan stared blankly ahead. When Callahan testified, he laid out everything. The investigation Gregory had ordered, the bugged conversations, the photos, the debts. He described Gregory's final visit to a clinic, proving his health had been perfect days before his death. "He wasn't an old man ready to collapse," Callahan said. "He was murdered." The defense grew desperate, trying to argue Daniel and Ethan had been manipulated by Lydia, that financial stress had driven them to poor decisions. But the recordings were undeniable. Both brothers had voiced the plan. Both had agreed to poison. Lydia's voice was sharp, but not the only one. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. I sat in that courtroom, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily, listening to every tick of the clock. When they returned, silence swallowed the room. The foreman read, "On the charge of first-degree murder of Gregory Whitfield, we find Daniel Whitfield guilty. We find Ethan Whitfield guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder against Nora Whitfield, we find both defendants guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find Lydia Whitfield guilty." The judge's voice was steady, merciless. "Daniel Whitfield, Ethan Whitfield, for the murder of your father and the conspiracy to murder your mother, you are sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole for 30 years. Lydia Whitfield, for conspiracy, you are sentenced to 25 years. The gavel struck. My sons collapsed into their seats. Lydia's face crumpled into fury. I sat perfectly still, tears rolling silently, knowing I had won justice but lost my family forever. The trial ended, but the story did not. Spring Creek buzzed with gossip for months, neighbors whispering my name like a parable. Some called me a heroine who had stood up for truth. Others muttered that I was heartless, a mother who had delivered her own sons to prison. I didn't correct either side. Both were true. Daniel lasted 6 months behind bars. The letter arrived one morning, scrawled in his restless handwriting. "Mom, I can't live with this. Tell Dad I'm sorry." The next day, a guard found him hanging in his cell with a torn bedsheet. My hands shook as I held the paper. He had chosen the same selfishness in death that he had in life, leaving others to carry the weight. Ethan unraveled differently. When he learned of Daniel's suicide, he broke. Prison officials sent word. Psychotic episodes, night terrors, violent outbursts. He screamed that Gregory visited him nightly, asking why his sons had turned poison into breakfast. Within weeks, they transferred him to a psychiatric ward, where he remains under constant surveillance. Sometimes letters arrive, smeared and incoherent. "Forgive me. Dad's eyes won't leave me. I didn't mean to. I no longer open them. I cannot." Lydia petitioned for divorce, reclaiming her maiden name. She disappeared to the city, rumors swirling, new identity, new circles, no trace of the woman who once sneered at my meatloaf. I heard she tried to charm her way back into society, but the stain of the Whitfield case clung too tightly. Greed leaves marks that no new name can erase. I took Gregory's insurance payout and gave it away. Blood money has no place in my cupboards. Instead, I founded the Gregory Whitfield Foundation for victims of family betrayal. Lawyers, counselors, investigators, all volunteers at first, later funded by donations. We helped widows tricked by children, elderly men defrauded by relatives, women silenced by family loyalty. Every case reopened my wounds, but also stitched them with purpose. One woman, Eleanor, came trembling into my office 6 months after the trial. She suspected her brother had murdered their mother for inheritance. Her story mirrored mine so closely it was like reading my diary. With our help, she proved the crime and saw justice done. She clutched my hands afterward, tears streaking her face. "Mrs. Whitfield, you saved me. If you hadn't stood up, I never would have had the courage." In her eyes, I saw what Gregory must have hoped for when he whispered through his pain, that his suffering might protect me and others. But peace carries its own price. Some nights, I sit on the porch, staring at Gregory's empty chair, listening to the night sounds. I imagine his hand brushing mine, his voice saying, "You did it, Nora. You saw it through." And then I remember the laughter of Daniel and Ethan as boys, running barefoot through the yard, catching fireflies in jars. Those boys are dead too, long before the methanol touched Gregory's lips. What rotted in them, I still cannot understand. Was it greed? Desperation? Or something darker, planted too deep for me to uproot? 5 years have passed. My hair is entirely white now, but Doris insists my eyes look brighter than before, as though freed from fog. I turned Gregory's shop into a garden, red roses, white carnations, sunflowers that chase the sun. Every Sunday I carry a bouquet to his grave. His headstone reads, "Gregory Whitfield, beloved husband, betrayed father, honorable man." At the fifth memorial, more than 200 people came: neighbors, victims helped by the foundation, officials, even strangers who had followed our story. Callahan gave a speech. Gregory Whitfield was poisoned by his own blood, but his legacy lives in the courage of his wife, who turned grief into justice. His words cut me open, but also stitched me whole. I do not cry for Daniel or Ethan anymore. I cry for the children they once were, but not the men they became. They chose their path, and the path consumed them. My family is not defined by blood. It is defined by love, by loyalty, by those who stay when the house is leaking and the world is unkind. When people ask if justice gave me peace, I tell them this: justice is never free. It costs love, innocence, trust. I lost my husband and my sons, but I found truth. And truth, though merciless, is the only soil where peace can grow. 2 years after the verdict, I received another letter, this one from the prison psychiatric ward. The envelope was stamped with state insignia, the handwriting jagged and uneven. I nearly left it sealed, but curiosity betrayed me. "Mom," it began. The nights don't stop. Dad sits by my bed, staring, silent. His eyes burn through me. Daniel talks to me too. He says I dragged him down, that I should have been stronger. I hear his footsteps in the hallway, though he's gone. Please forgive me. Please tell Dad to leave me alone. The paper smelled of disinfectant and fear. I folded it carefully and placed it in a shoebox with the others, letters I could not answer. I had no forgiveness to give. Spring Creek never stopped whispering. Some people crossed the street when they saw me, as though my tragedy were contagious. Others stopped to press my hand, offering pity or praise. The case became a cautionary tale parents told their children. Greed will eat you alive. I let the whispers pass me like wind. My life was quieter now, trimmed down to essentials. My garden, Doris, Callahan's weekly visits, the foundation's work. Callahan remained by my side in unexpected ways. Every Wednesday afternoon, he appeared at my porch with 2 coffees and a folder tucked under his arm. We would sit in the rocking chairs, Gregory's still empty, though sometimes I felt its weight shift with unseen presence. He told me stories of other investigations, some grim, some triumphant. Slowly, his visits became less professional and more personal. A friend, then something more, though neither of us ever dared put words to it. Perhaps companionship at my age doesn't need names. One Wednesday he asked, "Do you regret it, Nora, turning your own children in?" I sipped my coffee, watching sunflowers tilt toward the fading light. "No," I said. "Love without boundaries is not love, it's blindness. If I had stayed silent, Gregory's death would have been meaningless. My boys had already chosen money over blood. All I did was choose truth over lies." He nodded, as though he had been waiting for that answer. The foundation grew. Donations poured in after a documentary aired about my case. I never watched it. I didn't want to hear actors mimic my voice or see strangers pretend to be Gregory. But the attention brought survivors to our doors, widows scammed by nephews, grandfathers tricked into signing deeds, women pressured into silence by their own brothers. Each story was a mirror shard, reflecting the ugliness of betrayal. Yet every conviction, every victory, stitched another piece of Gregory's legacy. On the 5th anniversary of his death, we held a memorial at the cemetery. I wore a purple dress. Gregory always said it made my eyes look brighter. More than 200 people came. The mayor spoke, the pastor prayed, then Callahan read from Gregory's notes, the ones he had written before his death. "Something feels wrong. I don't trust their intentions. If anything happens, protect Nora." The crowd stood in silence, many wiping tears. For once, I felt Gregory's voice echo not only in my ears, but in the hearts of everyone present. That night, alone at the grave, I laid my bouquet of sunflowers and whispered, "I did it, love. I carried it through. But the price, oh, the price was steep." A breeze lifted, rustling the carnations, and for a moment I thought I heard his voice in the wind. "You were braver than I imagined, Nora." On the walk home, I realized something. Justice had come, but not closure. There is no closure for a mother whose sons become her husband's killers. There is only endurance. Endurance and the choice to keep living as proof that love, real love, is stronger than betrayal. I carry that choice every day. 6 years have passed since that morning at Gregory's grave, when my phone first buzzed with the words, "I'm alive." I sometimes wonder if that message saved my life or cursed it. Perhaps both. My house still stands, though I've painted it yellow, Gregory's favorite color. The leaks in the tin roof are long patched, but on rainy nights I still hear phantom drips, like ghosts of our past poverty. In the backyard, his workshop has become a garden. Roses, carnations, sunflowers that lean stubbornly toward the light. Every bloom is a prayer. Every bouquet I carry to his grave, another conversation unfinished. Spring Creek has changed, too. The townspeople now point to our case as legend. Parents tell their children, "Greed can kill." Some look at me with pity, others with awe, a few with suspicion, as if turning in my sons was the greater crime. But I've stopped caring about their verdicts. The only verdict that mattered was rendered in court. The foundation thrives. Last month, we helped convict a man who embezzled from his own sister after tricking her into signing power of attorney papers. Watching her hug me after the sentencing, whispering, "You gave me courage," was worth more than any money Daniel or Ethan ever dreamed of. Gregory would have smiled, pipe in hand, proud of the good sown from tragedy. And yet, peace is complicated. Ethan remains alive in the psychiatric ward, his mind fractured. Guards say he mutters apologies to invisible ghosts, sometimes screaming Gregory's name at night. Letters still come, full of rambling guilt and desperate pleas for forgiveness. I keep them sealed in a shoebox, hidden in the closet. Some nights I touch the lid, wondering if opening them would heal or reopen wounds. I never find the courage. Daniel is gone, buried by his own hand. I did not attend his prison funeral. A mother should never see her son lowered into the ground wearing chains. But I still feel his absence like a bruise I cannot stop pressing. Lydia vanished. Rumor says she lives in another state, under another name. Sometimes when I pass a woman in a red dress or heels sinking into the dirt, I imagine it's her, sneering again at my quaint life. Then I remind myself, she too lives in her own prison, one without walls but heavy with disgrace. As for me, I sit on the porch most evenings with Callahan. He still brings coffee every Wednesday, though we now laugh more than we cry. Some nights,
#meta. When the sky is pink with sunset, I glance at Gregory's empty chair and feel the strangest certainty that he's still here, listening, proud. Would I undo it all if I could? Bring Gregory back, erase the poison, keep my sons innocent? Of course. But life doesn't give back what it takes. It only offers choices in the aftermath. Silence or truth, blindness or sight. I chose truth, though it cost me my family. And yet, perhaps, it saved others. That is my only comfort. So when people ask me what I learned, I tell them this. Family is not an excuse for betrayal. Blood does not sanctify crime. True love does not poison, does not steal, does not lie. And justice is never cheap. It demands a price. Every Sunday, I kneel by Gregory's grave and whisper, "Your death was not in vain." The breeze always stirs then, rustling the sunflowers, as if answering. And though I live with scars that will never fade, I live, I endure, I remember. Because betrayal may wound, but truth is the only legacy worth leaving behind.